Okay, so welcome everybody. Good to see you all again. One topic we haven't covered over the course of a year, and it seems to me to be a very important one for a lot of people who embark on Aikido as a passion, is Aikido as a spiritual path. I tend to avoid those words personally because I struggle to define what that means. So I decided I'd call on somebody who did have some idea of what it means. And I'm delighted to introduce today Bjorn Saw Sensei. Bjorn, tell us a little bit about your Aikido journey, where it started and how that linked with what was going on in your life.
Okay, thank you, Quentin, for inviting me, and hello, everybody. Well, I just happened to come across Aikido because I think my mother was looking for some judo classes for me. I think she just wanted my energy to be dispersed somewhere. But we didn't find any judo around where we were. And by chance, another kid moved into the same school as me, and he was doing Aikido. So I just tagged along with him. And I found Tomita Sensei, who was this student of Saito Sensei. Right. And he had come to Sweden in 69, and I found him in 74. And I started in his kids class, and I never left, kind of.
What was it that appealed to you about Aikido?
I don't know. I remember me and my mom, we had seen kids judo on TV, and I kind of loved it. It looked so much fun, just wrestling on the mats. And and then of course, when I went to Aikido, I had no idea. They named it, I had no idea. But they had the same uniform. They were wrestling on the mat. They had the Japanese instructor, plus we had sticks. So, one step up from judo. So I was hooked.
So how long were you practicing in Sweden, and where did you go next?
I kept practicing in his club until I was 22. Or actually, when I first left, was 22, and I went to visit Japan. My first time in 87 for a very short visit to see Saito Sensei. And then that started the next decade of traveling to Iwama, I think 4 times, and altogether 2.5 years. And in between, when I went back to Sweden, I went back to my old dojo, and then I went to Japan, and I went back to Tomita. But by the time I left Iwama, in 93, by that time, Tomita and Saito Sensei had split because Tomita wanted to do his own thing in Sweden, and he wanted to start up his own organization and stand on his own 2 feet. And so when I came home, I felt I really have, I was now Saito's student. Yep. And also coming back from there, I started my own club in the suburbs of Stockholm.
Right.
The first club, together with a friend of mine.
So had Aikido changed for you by the time that you got to that stage? So initially it was kind of rough and tumble, play with sticks, meet your friends. What did it become by that stage?
Well, I think the kids class was just, just learning how to move and roll and ukemi and, just like that. But I moved into the adult class when I was 15, I believe. And by that time, my ukemi was getting good. And 15 to 20, the body is in the best shape ever. So taking ukemi from the big boys and the big women, not big women, but older women. And so those years, I think, was fantastic. And Tomita Sensei, although we did Iwama Aikido, Tomita Sensei himself is a much smaller person than Saito Sensei. And his Aikido is much more agile and flowing and less I think people must understand that when Westerners came to Iwama, there was a lot of beginners coming to Iwama on an ongoing basis. So Saito Sensei was always trying to accommodate the people that just moved into the dojo. So it became very, very basic training for many people that were very inexperienced in Aikido, because he kind of let the high-graded people get on with it by themselves. But our club in Stockholm, because that was a well-established club, of training, was in one way much faster, much more flowing than we had in Iwama, because of there was a standard that it was being kept up continuously. So really the practice more or less has been the same throughout the years. So that hasn't really changed.
Okay, so
the foundation.
When did you decide to become Uchideshi to Saito Sensei? And given that the training you were getting there was pretty basic, or at least it often was pretty basic, what was the incentive to do it?
Oh, well, the basic was advanced, if I may say so. To learn the basic with Saito Sensei in Iwama was fantastic, because it taught us the basic feel, and also the feeling through his basic was very advanced, very, very advanced. So it was wonderful to do that Aikido. Of course, I was young, 22, 23, 24, 25. And yes, it was like, okay, we want to do it hard, we're going to hold hard, we're going to throw each other hard and all of that. But it was never, most of us, especially us that lived there, it was pleasant. It was good training, strong training. It was never aggressive or violent. Saito Sensei would not have aggression and violence in his dojo.
Yeah.
So
you, I suspect you must have grown up in a Christian household, because I know Christianity is important to you. No?
No.
Find that later.
My grandparents were Christian on both sides, right. Very much so. But both my parents, maybe because of that, and they were brought up in the academic world, and so they never looked at that for their lives. So I have to kind of find that for myself.
Okay. And you also were very interested in Buddhism. So I'm not sure if you went off on a sort of journey and did meditation in India. Did you do that?
So when I left Sweden when I was 22, I traveled to Asia for 2.5 years, and that was part of that trip. I went to Japan, to Iwama for the first time. But part of that trip was sort of me leaving and wanting to find out just first of all, it was just an adventure to see Asia for 2.5 years, right. And traveling and being confronted by their religion, their philosophies, and also being interested for myself what it was all about, and what it all meant. And I was growing up, I had no idea what life was about, and I had a yearning in my heart, wanting to find out.
Sure. And I know you've managed to sort of blend what you found in Buddhism and what you have from Christianity, and there's no contradiction for you there. You're able to sort of meld them together, and they're both meaningful for you. Is that correct?
To some extent, but I see them as also very, very specific paths and teachings. So I do not kind of want to I keep them very separate. Buddhism is Buddhism, and Christianity is Christianity, and has very distinct flavor to it. And also, of course, within Christianity, there's different flavors, and within Buddhism, there are different flavors too. And as likewise in Aikido and martial arts, depend very much depending on the teacher and the lineage.
Sure. So both of those things are, most people would describe them as a spiritual path. And of course, Aikido, you see very much as a spiritual path. So how do you pull all that together?
Well, I don't necessarily see Aikido as a spiritual path.
Okay.
Not by default. And in one way, Christianity and Buddhism I mean, if you're brought up in a Buddhist country or Christian country and you are default Christian, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking it on as your path.
Right.
But if, and I think that's fair enough, because just the theology, just the tradition itself can be very beautiful and very educative, and promote all the good things that they, like the spirit promotes. And but if you have an inner yearning to come to terms with yourself in the deepest, most sense about life and about who you are, and like that, of course the religions are pointing to a truth that is absolute. And so then it's up to us to gather the evidence, as it were, and come to our own conclusions about what that really means in our lives. And of course, then we have what we use each other, we use learning, we learn from each other, we learn from the different religions, the spiritual faith there are, we learn from teachers and like that. And like Aw Sensei, when I look at Aikido, I look at Aw Sensei as a man who had that quest in his own heart of wanting to find out what the truth was. And he did it through his own search, in his conditions, in his context, through Omoto Kyo, mixed with some esoteric Buddhism, Shingon Buddhism, and that. And then he met his spiritual teacher in Onisaburo Diguchi, and more or less adopted the Omoto Kyo theology landscape as it is, and he very much saw his Aikido in the light of that.
Okay, let me pull you back to a word you just used. You said searching for the truth. The truth about what?
About life itself.
So what life is all about, if you like.
There, according to, if we just go by the traditions and religions, they point to a truth, an absolute truth of existence. They say that's the template. Okay. You gotta see the template. You gotta kind of realize God.
Okay. And so what comes out from what you've said is that it doesn't. I mean, following this sort of spiritual path doesn't really have anything to do with the context of the particular religion you follow. So you're not a Motokyo. That's not a path you've chosen. You live quite happily with the Buddhist side of yourself, and the Christianity part of yourself, and the Aikido part of yourself. All of those inform you towards this truth about the meaning of life. Why do you see that as a purposeful path? Why do we need to understand the meaning of life? Why is that important for you?
Well, I think it's very personal, like you said, because it doesn't tick everybody's box, but and it actually ticks people's boxes in different ways. It's not the same for everybody, but if there is, I think it's, if we may say it's important, I think it's important. It was important for me. So with that conclusion, I would maybe, dare to say it can be important for you too. but I also want to be very, very open about, we are speaking about the human being, and as such, we don't need to overlay our experience with a lot of dogma to begin with. We want to address who we are in the biggest possible way, and we want to explore that, and we want to investigate that. Then, if we then are having, let's say, like I had this, but what's Jesus about? What's that about? Or what did the Buddha mean? What does this mean? So I had this personal interest to understand what they were talking about. Like I have now with Aw Sensei, I'm trying to figure out what Omoto Kyo was all about. And that's like a whole investigation in itself.
Sure.
In order to come to my own perception of something that, that can be not just intellectual, not just academically reading up upon the history of Christianity or something. But, for me, when I wanted to find out about Jesus, I wanted to, in one way, I wanted to realize Jesus in myself. I want to understand him as spirit, as what they talk about. I want to take, when they're speaking about the Buddha, or when you read the original writings of the Buddha, for example, I want to be able to understand it as he expressing it, because otherwise it's not mine. I have to make it mine. I have to experience what they're talking about. And since it's timeless, I can do it now, even though he said it 2,500 years ago.
Sure. So one of the reasons I steer clear of using a word like spiritual is because I struggle to define it. What's your definition of a spiritual path?
It's true, because people define it in different ways, and depending on if you put a capital S on it or a lowercase s on it, it means different things for different people and within different contexts. So in that sense, we also have to keep it case specific. So when Sensei speaks about kami, we have to understand much more about Omoto-kyo, understanding of kami, and stuff like that. And this is fascinating in itself. And when we speak about Holy Spirit in Christianity, we have to kind of go into that world to discover what they mean. So I don't think we can't really generalize about what we mean with spirit as such, unless we say, okay, spirit. The way, if I would explain as I see spirit with capital,
I hope you would.
Yes, with capital S.
Yeah.
Then I'm talking about the spiritual nature that we all have as our background. It's a universal, impersonal, spiritual nature that you can't put your finger on. You can't really see it, but you can have the experience of it. You can come to realize this. You can have a direct, penetrating revelation of it, where all doubts leaves you, because you realize you're actually already drowned within it. You're part of it, the essence of who you are. As we sit and speak here and now, we all participate in it. But so some people call it your true nature, your real self, your not your personal spirit, but something that is completely impersonal.
Is it also to do with your relationship with, I'm going to use the word planet or nature, something like that, how you fit into the system?
No, I think everybody relates to it in the sense that people might not be conscious of it, but when people are relaxed and natural, they feel affinity with all things. They feel affinity with nature. They feel affinity to being alive. They feel affinity to the other, unless they're being not so nice to you. But so we have this love. We have this quality of love, and love is really, in its biggest possible sense, it's the nature of your being, of spirit.
Okay, so I was going to say, well, you've said it's a very personal thing, and I totally get that. But I'm looking for some commonality here, and I think you've just hit on it. Is love the common thing?
Yes. So love, we all can relate to love, but love can take enormous. It can take it on enormous. It can take on an enormous context, in depth, and it relates to your spirit. It is the qualitative essence of your spirit, and that's why we're all so much aware of it, or lack of. But this is what all religions are pointing to.
So, talk to me about how these various threads, but particularly Aikido, have helped you towards finding greater contentment, peace with the world, being able to exude love not all the time, nobody gets love all the time, but it just makes you feel more at one with what's going on.
What I like to stress is this kind of fantastic thing. I kind of love it, because so when I was a teenager, I had this, I wanted to go out and I wanted to find what the truth was. I had no idea but I wanted to find some kind of satisfaction with myself.
Sure.
And this seeking led me to try to learn about this, learn about that, and so forth. And then finally, when things start being revealed to me, I realized I had it all along since day one. So I had only been not seeing it clearly. So this innate happiness, this innate love expression of just being a human being, which is not personal, that we all have, you just need to kind of step back a little bit and let that come out of yourself. Of course, maybe you have to get out of some poor circumstances that you live within that completely cramps that love. So you might have to actually make big changes in your life, because maybe your life situation is draining you from this freedom. But I have always seen myself as a happy-go-lucky guy. I consider myself completely fortunate, from day one, really. Ignorantly bumbling through life.
Well, no, I share that with you. I think I'm a lucky guy, and I'm usually pretty happy-go-lucky, and I started with a good hand, so I haven't had to sort of de-layer all the crap that life might have thrown at me, because it's thrown very little crap my way. So what is it about Aikido that you consider makes it a spiritual path?
What I love about Aikido is the relational aspect, is that we are relating. And so what I had to learn the hard way, because I didn't really learn this from Buddhism or Christianity, because I had a good fortune, or not, of running into a spiritual teacher that became a teacher for 12 years. So he was my spiritual mentor for 12 years. And that was both fantastic and very difficult at the same time. But he's more or less the one that reawakened something in me. Well, he didn't personally do it, but by being in his presence and being his student, it reawakened something in me. And through living with him and his community, you start realizing that there was a lot more to the spiritual life than I first had any idea of. There's so much more to it. And a big part of it is learning how to live with other people, how to be with other people, how to communicate, and how to, how to be with other people. Because if you realize love and God within yourself, you have to be able to relate.
So what tradition did he come from, or she come from?
He didn't come from any tradition, and maybe that was good, but also it was bad in one way. So he was himself a very, very serious seeker, that he was so one-pointed. So he had been seeking for much of his adult life, for many years, very serious in his pursuit, meditation retreat, seeing teachers, doing this, doing that, very one-pointed, until he met his teacher, and suddenly everything opened up for him, and teaching became natural to him. And he, over many years, he created a big community worldwide. And his emphasis, and which I kind of emphasize too, is that if you want to know what the real is, you have to look for the truth. You have to find the truth. And then when we can accommodate the truth, when we can realize the truth, we want to participate. When we participate with other people, that is what is most important. How am I when I'm with you? And that Aikido is that the physical ability to be with another person. And of course the sensitivity of moving, and the technical understanding of Aiki and internal strength. I mean, that's fascinating stuff, but doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the love effect of just being with you, because I can just sit down and have a cup of coffee with you, and I'm happy.
So that this revelation that how you get on with your relationships with others is kind of key. Was that a big change in your Aikido journey, because there you had the perfect medium to express that in what can be difficult circumstances when someone's trying to punch you or hit you or grab you or push you or whatever?
Well, actually, I think the reason why I took to Aikido in the beginning was exactly because it wasn't violent, it wasn't competitive. That's really why I stayed with it. I didn't have to make a team. I didn't have to make a grade. I could train on my own terms in my own time, and I of course I did team sports and stuff like that. But when it became too competitive, I said, "Thank you, I'm out." And so I was really never in that competitive mindset. So Aikido just suited me. I liked it. I liked the combined effort of training together hard, but without that violent streak of trying to overcome the other person. You know, the uke-nage relationship for me was beautiful. First I throw and then I get thrown, or vice versa. I thought that was like, well, that's fair. You throw me, I throw you. No, and
so when I came to Aikido, it was very much like finding a friend. It kind of just fitted my belief system and purpose anyway. Sounds to me like that was the same for you. True?
No, I was just a kid wanting to wrestle on the mat, really. I didn't have any bigger aspirations. But one thing, I wasn't there to learn how to fight. I wasn't there to learn how to defend myself. I was 11 years old. I didn't think about, I got to learn how to defend myself on the street. No way. And when I became that age, when that maybe would be something that would be of my concern, I was like, no, I'm not going into that. I'm not seeking that out. I'm walking away from it. Even today, I never had a street fight. I've been in one dangerous situation, but that solved itself by, I think, the composure.
Yes, I remember.
And I think that's what Aikido gives you. It gives you that composure of being. And I know very well that Aikido or any martial art doesn't give you any guarantees for safety. You know,
I presume that's the story in the park that you
yes.
in the book. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've practiced with you a little bit, and I never find your Aikido hard. It's very fluid and soft and gentle and powerful. At what point did it become important to you to not throw in a hard way? What was the turning point there?
And actually, it maybe sounds strange, but even when we threw hard in Iwama, but even before then, I was never in my Swedish club in Stockholm, in my dojo in Stockholm. I was never really violated in the technical aspects. You know, no one was really violently putting a technique onto you. And if they did, you say, hey, slow down a bit. That's a bit too much. Thank you very much. So I was always in one way good hands. So I was always brought up to taking care of my uke. One was taking care, maybe not always perfectly, but I was brought into the school of taking care of my uke when I applied the technique. You know, we clap out. We learned this from day one. That's inherent in Aikido, that we respect each other's limitations, physical limitations and emotional limitations. And that was a learning curve, of course. That was a learning curve. How do you assess that when you meet different people? How can you feel it? How can you be emotionally awake to people's different things? And you know, like I think we all know that the dojo is such a good, safe place to actually allowing things that maybe some people, you know, have difficulty being pinned down, stuff like that. So a lot of stuff coming out. So one has to be very careful. But the dojo in itself, especially if the teacher and the student, the senior students are careful, then it's the most wonderful place to be, because there's a safe place to put pressure on each other in this way. But even today, I walk away. I'm not a fighter. So I make a very big distinction between, are you learning to fight or not? I never learned to fight. So I'm not the fighter. I can't fight, really.
Okay, so I mean, I think you've proven that you, in your own way, are very much a seeker, to just use your word describing your teacher, your spiritual teacher. How's it going?
Oh, that was, I met him in 91, and what I did realize, and this is quite interesting, yeah, and a lot of you might find this interesting, because there was a part of my life that when I remember back when I was really young, like I was actually before I was 1 year old, my first memory of my life was when I was before 1 year old. And I know that because I remember the place I was, and that was a flat that we left when I was 1 year old. And I remember it like today. And I had kind of a spiritual awakening when I was a baby in the lap of my father in front of a fire. So everything was like peaceful, perfect, and something opened up. I didn't realize the significance of it at the time, but it always remained with me and I saw it only as my first memory, but it was a wonderful memory that always made me smile. And I would always see it as that's why I always have a very positive outlook on life, because I always see life as beautiful and whole all the time. So when I met my teacher, what happened with him within 2 weeks, I was with him in India, is that this initial awakening that I had when I was a child, suddenly, and then I had been seeking for 5 years. Then I had been seeking, Buddhist seeking, I'd been meditating, I've been reading every book I can lay my hands on. I was coming to a point of desperation because I found I can't do this. I don't know how to do it. It's difficult. And I met him, and within a week or two, suddenly my whole life exploded again. So my whole chest just opened, my heart just opened, and all these insights, revelation just fell on me. And I have that expressed in one of my publications. But and that led me into the relationship with my teacher that lasted for 12 years, which was more of a grind of now going to churn through what I have realized myself to be, and also learning on the job, as it were, what it means to live life from this perspective. Because it's, they say in Christianity, they say you're born again. And then they say, well, you're just a baby Christians, just take your time. And that's what it really means, because you come into a new perspective. You come into a new way of seeing life and yourself from a selfless point of view, which is what we would say we can now attest to our own spirit. But everything is new, so we have to learn how to walk again. And so after 12 years with him, and that if you have a teacher, that also involves a path of surrender the ego, the selfish attachment to self-identity that is lingering on. Unless you're very, very fortunate, it will linger on, because that's who we believe ourselves to be, and it will linger on. And whenever you read any spiritual material, when you speak about the ego struggle, or the difficulties on the path, this is what is difficult, to letting go of your selfish attachment to yourself. Because under pressure, who matters most? Me. so you don't get away from yourself quite easily. So you're under pressure. So there's a whole path of when you have to reconcile understanding who you are with this new perspective, and that you can't let yourself get away with all the bullshit that you've been letting yourself get away with before. So and that's quite hard. That's the hard path, because you don't want to surrender that. So your teacher, if he's real, he's not going to let you off the hook. He's going to keep pointing at it. He's going to keep irritating you until you let go. It doesn't mean that you become a saint. It doesn't mean that the teacher is a saint. It doesn't mean that. But he understands the psychology of ego attachment, or of wrongly identifying with something that is fundamentally illusory.
Yeah.
So after 12 years, I had come to a point in my relationship with him that I had resolved it. I had gone full circle with him, and I said, I'm done. I'm out of here. Thank you so much. And then I stepped away, and I never looked back. So, and that's when I started my club in England. and I do my own thing.
So, I mean, you're touching on some things that really sort of speak to me in terms of what my Aikido is, I hope, about, and certainly is supposed to be about, which is about being selfless and giving and love and stuff like that. And yet you've got this dichotomy that in order to do that, you really do have to look very hard at yourself. So it is all about self, but in order to be better in a better place in your world, really. And we get that expressed on the mat in a real cauldron environment where it's the perhaps most difficult place to let that out, to just accept an attack and receive it and deal with the person delivering that with a feeling of care. That seems to me to be very much about what your spiritual path is pointing to.
Yes, and I would also like to add that I'm learning so much more about Aikido during this year of lockdown, and I'm learning about stuff that I really don't know much about, and I know that there can be a lot of skilled people without any sense of care, actually, or any sense of spirit, if I would say that, and without any sense of spirit, who can be very, very good martial artists, very good Aikidoka, very, very good, very sensitive, and they can be very proficient in what they're doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have dealt with their ego or dealt with in the spiritual sense of what it means to deal with the ego.
Okay, then hard question then. So,
yeah.
So does being a good martial artist mean that you're practicing Aikido? Because for me, there's a difference. You can be technically great at Aikido, but it doesn't make you a practitioner of Aikido. You can be technically great at the moves, but if that's all it is for you, then it's not Aikido for me.
No, exactly. So I think Aikido has that moral, ethical dimension, which in one way, I do believe that most modern arts have, because I don't think any martial arts today are out there to create killers and people that's going to maim each other. Even within MMA, it's still rules. It's still the octagon. Don't kill each other. It's still, they still have some limitations. But I think why Aikido would be called a spiritual path is down to Saw Sensei, I believe. It's down to Saw Sensei, and because Saw Sensei followed the spiritual path, and he spoke about these things in very archaic language, but very emotive language. Now, I think it's very important that we learn about what he's talking about, because I have now, during this last 3-4 years, I have learned that many things he speaks about the internal system of the body, not necessarily a spiritual system. He speaks about the internal relationship between yin and yang, and that's what I'm trying to practicing now, and that's wonderful. It's wonderful in itself, but it's a little bit wrong to point to that as being the spiritual aspect of Aikido, because it's not. I think the spiritual aspect has to do with your humanness of understanding humanity and who you are with humanity, and how you deal with your neighbor, how you act with the person that is in front of you.
But let's take that yin yang thing then. So isn't a deeper understanding of how that works, doesn't that kind of inform your view of the way the planet works, and therefore gives you a better handle on how to relate to other people? Because you kind of know this is yin, this is yang, and how to get the best out of that situation. I don't see them as exclusive. I see them as very much part and parcel of the same thing. It's like learning, learning where to put our feet, etc., and hands in Aikido. It is important. It's not what Aikido is about, but unless you understand where to put your hands and feet and how to move your center, you'll never get it. I think isn't yin yang just an extension of that?
No, definitely. In order to do Aikido, the more we know, the better. to practice Aikido. And in some degree, I agree with you that it relates to how we relate to other people and our capacity to relate to other people. But I think fundamentally, the capacity to deal with other people and ourselves has to do with the capacity for you to love.
Right.
And that is not really dependent upon your knowledge of yin and yang balancing, I think. But maybe I'm too new with this yin yang stuff, so I may be speaking too soon. Maybe I have to change my mind.
So that's something you've explored over this year, but you did say this year you've learned a lot. Tell us more about that.
Well, I ran into, no, I actually did seek him out. I think 4 or 5 years ago, I had heard about Dan Harden, and I wanted to know what the fuss was all about. And I went to see his teaching here in Bristol. I live close to Bristol now. And he blew me away with the skill he has. And I really enjoyed it. And I found that he had an ability to teach how to do it, which I'm struggling with learning. But I seen something in him that I haven't seen in anybody else. And I haven't met many martial artists, but I put my hands on a few, and it's extraordinary the skill he has, but not only the skill, but he's able to explain it. He's able to show you physically. He's able to able to demonstrate it, which is rare, to be able to really precisely put your finger on it and wanting to share it with you. Now, so that's, and of course now lockdown, we haven't been able to have him over to England, because he used to come quite a lot. He used to come 4 or 5 times to England, both to London and to Bristol. So we haven't had him for a while. But of course, what I have learned with him and what I'm learning from him, I'm taking that into my Iwama style Aikido, my Aikido, which is now more evolved than what I did in Iwama. So, and now it evolves even more thanks to learning about the principles of the yin yang, of the Aiki, of the Hara, 3 elements that I hardly knew about before. And so it informs what I already have and hopefully improves it.
Sure it does.
And of course, so that helps me mentally, physically. Aikido has always been the training, the practice that keeps us healthy, keeps us happy, keeps us occupied, keeps us off the street. So in that sense, Aikido, any martial art or any activity is necessary for us to live. But the mental aspect and the heart aspect of understanding what life is about, I believe that, like my grandmother, who never practiced a martial art in her life, I believe, and she was a believing Christian all her life, and she was the most beautiful woman, and she taught me so much through her compassion, through her modesty, through her faith, which beats all Aikido in the world. So
I've asked you lots of questions. Are there any? I'm going to open it up to other people in a short while. Is there any key element of this journey, Aikido as a spiritual path, that you are surprised I haven't asked about, and that you can now help me out and fill in the gaps?
Shall I say something?
You've got a completely free hand to say what you like.
Well, I think Aikido was perfect that I had Aikido, because it fitted like hand in glove with my spiritual understanding. So it was already there, and I was already on the Aikido path when I start upturning my life. So maybe my whole life changed, my whole life transformed, but what stayed with me was the Aikido. Maybe I lost. So when this revelation started happening, I lost a lot of my old life. Friends and family just disappeared, and new things came. but Aikido's kind of, even though I took I had a few years of pause, because there was a time where I needed to put all my energy and all my effort into pursuing my spiritual path. So Aikido had to take a sidestep at the time, but then I picked it up again when I felt more confident with it. So in one way, that is the thing that I have with me from before. And I told my teacher when I was 11, I said to him, I said, when I realized that Aikido you could do till you get old, so I said, oh, I realized I never have to stop. And he laughed and he laughed and he said, well, then you have to teach me when I'm old. And so I said, okay, Father. No, I don't have to teach you. No, just kidding. But I think that the important thing is with Aikido and spirituality is Saw Sensei. He's Saw Sensei. But I don't necessarily think we don't need to look at Omotokyo and the Gucci. I think we need to understand Omotokyo and the Gucci to a certain extent in order to understand Saw Sensei. But what I want to point is to follow his example in his wish to learn about life, to learn about who he is, and to learn about what spirit is. I think that's what he was doing when he left Hokkaido. He left his martial art teacher and he went to see the Gucci, his spiritual teacher. And I will always say that spirit will always take priority. If you have to choose between Aikido and spirit, Aikido goes every day, every time.
Let's hope that the two run side by side for a little while longer.
Well, according to Saw Sensei, Aiki is universal and has always existed. So maybe so, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up to everybody else now. So who's got some questions or points they'd like to make? Dimitra.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the beautiful presentation, beautiful sharing. I just have to confess that that it's the first time that in an Aikido session, I cannot but agree with every single point that someone is talking about. It is it was very surprising and touching. And I have similar views on most of the things that Bjorn shared with us. And not necessarily, I defend that not necessarily, spirituality does not necessarily need to associate with any religion or the, and all the status quo of any religion. And about Omotokyo, and because Saw Sensei would consider himself as a religious person in his time, and in his way, in his Japanese way, with his Japanese experience of life. And what really has struck me about his saying is that he would see kami in everything. He would see divinity, sacredness in everything. In the mountain, in the river, there is the sacredness of creation in everything. And we're no different from that. Mm. We have more intelligence. We are better, the most sophisticated machine on the planet, Homo sapiens. But we all have consciousness. We all are parts of kami. And I think for him, from what I have sensed and through the readings of his teachings, I think that for him, spirituality meant to be in touch with creation, to be in touch with life, to be in touch with creation.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Anybody else got anything? Otherwise, I'm coming to you, Sean, because you're a great researcher of Sensei's writings. I'm really intrigued to know how you found this. Okay, I'm coming to you then, because nobody is sticking their hand up.
Yeah, you've said that Saw Sensei is the key to spirituality in Aikido, and I'd like to hear from you a little bit more about where you go to connect with that, or what are some of the things that you have found by studying Saw Sensei that speak to this spirituality in Aikido that you have made a concrete application of in guiding your practice?
Mm. Well, first of all, I think when I went, I think I was lucky to have Tomita Sensei, who was a student of of Saito Sensei, but Tomita Sensei also received his fourth one from O Sensei in Iwama. And then when I went to Iwama, it's quite palpable. I never met O Sensei, but it feels like it's his place. And Saito Sensei very much is the caretaker of O Sensei's place. So just living in Iwama and practicing in Iwama in O Sensei's dojo gives you a feeling, I think it gives you a feeling of the quality of his Aikido, of the atmosphere of his Aikido, which Saito Sensei nurtured in his respect for O Sensei by coming into practice every day in that dojo. And even if you go there today, even now when Saito Sensei is gone, the same feeling is there. It's incredible. So anyone who's doing Aikido, just go and see the Iwama dojo. Is fantastic. So I think that is one of the early. I think all of us that lived in Iwama can and been there can bear witness to this. And I think maybe that's where my first interest in him as a person started. And then, of course, I think we, like many of us, we have read the superficial material about O Sensei and his life and all that. And over the years, I've been able to find more information. Aikido Journal, of course, Stan Pranin, of course. And now these days we have Sangen Kai, Honolulu, Hawaii, with Christopher Lee, who's doing fantastic translation work of old texts. I think that's been a revelation. And now just recently, I have come across David Valadez Sensei from California, who was a scholar in Eastern spiritual culture or history, who has done, I just recently put it up on my Facebook page, is very, very good writings about the understanding of Omotokyo, Deguchi, and in its line to O Sensei. I have also picked up the books of, the books of Deguchi. Let's see, where are they? About Japanese shamanism, Katapabo. The one about, just recently I found a fantastic book of the origin and the foundation of Shinkon Kishin practice, the meditative practice of spirit absorption of O Sensei and Omotokyo. This is super, super interesting to understand. So, and these books, I think this knowledge of this background hasn't been readily available to us only the last maybe 10, 15 years. You probably know much more about it, but I'm just finding these sources that I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I do agree that to learn the history of anything is super important, to learn where it comes from and to understand how they thought in the time, put it into context. But why I do that with Buddhism, I do that with Christianity, I do that with Islam to some extent. But I do it because it all stems from my own journey to find the truth. And unless I would have found the truth for myself, I would never even be able to skim the surfaces of O Sensei, of the different religions, of these things, because I have a reference point in myself when I read about these things.
So can you give an example of something that O Sensei said, like a teaching from O Sensei, that based upon this experience, your own experience of truth and spirituality, right, that you interpret through that lens? Can you give us an example?
Yes, well, nothing really. I don't have a quote to give you. I don't think I have a quote, but I think he speaks about different things. So when he speaks about the Daito-ryu aspects of body, yin and yang, internal strength exercises that how we apply the body in a martial situation or in Aiki situation, as it were. To understand Aiki in the body and structure, I think that very applies to the practice of Aikido. Very, very physical, very internal, very sensitive. And but his sheer, I believe there's a part of his teaching that are just referring to what you call it, the larger implications of being one with the universe, or seeing that everything is love, that we see spirit in everything, that the spiritual essence of myself I see everywhere. I see that in you, I see that in the rock, I see that in the mountain. You can appreciate now that everything is coherently whole. And he speaks about that sense of being one with the universe. But one has to be careful, because one has to look at case by case, because one has to look at his statements within the context he's saying them. So for example, when he had this revelation of the golden body and he realized he was one with the universe, that wasn't, for me, he didn't realize he was one with you. He didn't realize he was now having a revelation of the experience of being one with the universe. This is a quite common spiritual experience. This is not uncommon in the spiritual side. It's like, what I find a little bit funny is that Aikido is not really a spiritual path. It's a martial art path. So a lot of things that spiritual path, religions take for granted, we are sort of like amazed by, but that's like common parlor in Christianity or in Buddhism. That's just our bread and butter, so.
That's interesting. Jamie, do you want to ask a question?
Or Sean had something more to say.
Sure, I'll come back to you after, Jamie. Is that okay?
Sure.
Just very
Okay, sure. Let's stay with you, and then I'll come to Jamie.
Just a very short thing. I really appreciate your sharing. I want to just point out that this term that we usually translate as "I am the universe," at least some of the time, O-sensei is actually saying "Uchu sono mono watashi," which is I who am that thing which is the universe, which is different from I am the universe.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful about the translation.
Exactly. And we have to understand the context, and we have to, but that study in itself, what I love about it, this introspection, this study of the word, of the translations, is itself a digging of finding out the truth, which is revelatory in itself. So just going down that path is like, go for it. That's gonna blow your mind.
I think you've got a space, Jamie.
Yeah. Bjorn, so nice to see you, and just lovely to listen. A couple of things that I made a whole bunch of notes I've been thinking about listening, but one is it's probably somewhere in the, I don't know, almost 20 years into Aikido when I kind of came across Ramana Maharshi and satsang and enlightenment, and this the spiritual seeking for enlightenment and all, and it made me think, and I'm wondering your thoughts on this. No one's really ever quite done what O-sensei's done in Aikido. I mean, we've had all these phenomenal teachers, there's no question about it, but no one's quite been like doing what O-sensei did. And a lot of those teachers kind of looked at him askance, like, here's this crazy old man, right? And saying all this esoteric, mystical stuff. And I started thinking, well, maybe he was like really, his consciousness was at that level or in the nature of an enlightened, master, spiritual master. And here people were going like, that's crazy stuff. What do you think about that? And also O-sensei saying things like, my Aikido is not a religion. It brings all religions to completion. So I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts on
yeah, for sure. No, for me, absolutely. O Sensei is a realized human being.
Mhm,
Definitely,
mhm.
definitely. There's no doubt about it. Just following just reading his life story and what he went through, and his, meeting his spiritual teacher, and reading his writings and learning about, definitely he has deep, deep, deep spiritual understanding. But more so than that, and which everyone attests to that have met him, his direct students, just meeting O Sensei was an overwhelming experience. And I have a small experience of that when I was in Iwama. This was actually quite interesting. I was there with, I met my first wife there, and she was Japanese. And we were sitting on the train station in Iwama. We were going back to somewhere, I don't know where. And we were sitting on the bench waiting for the train. And next to us on the bench was an older gentleman, older Japanese man. And of course, he looked at me and said, "Oh, who's this guy, Jin? Who is this foreigner?" So my wife, Japanese, spoke to him, and we said, "Well, we are a student of Saito-kun, because he knew Saito as a little boy, so he would call him Kun, Saito's little boy, yeah, not Saito Sensei." so, oh, you train in Ueshiba's dojo. He didn't call it Saito's dojo; he called it Ueshiba's dojo. So he was old enough to know, he was in town when O Sensei was around. So he said, "Oh yeah, I know O Sensei, or I know Ueshiba-san." And he said, and this stayed with me, he said, he had eyes like this. Twirls coming out of his eyes. That's how he described it to us. And it was like, okay, sure.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people have that experience when they met him, which gives testimony to extremely transformed body and mind. And I think part of the transformation was his shugyo, his aiki severe practice that he did throughout his life, and mixed with deep philosophical and spiritual insight that came through even before Omotikyo, but highlighted and maybe put into context with Omotikyo and Deguchi, and much afterwards, lot of more spiritual revelations. And I just want to say that because it's important to understand, if you are seeking for truth, once you break through, as it were, let's say you break through to your initial awakenings, you break through that glass ceiling, then there's not just one experience, a lot's going to come. Yeah, so you just need to go that extra mile to break through. Then you're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to be overwhelmed, and it's not just going to stop.
Thank you. I love that image. That's amazing. That's a great story. So thank you. Yeah, you just led to my other, a couple other questions, but I'll just ask one more. And that is about seeking and finding. So, talking about you can get overwhelmed. I mean, there is so much more, so much higher, so much deeper, however you look at it, to go, right? At the same time, what's been your experience in terms of seeking, being a seeker? Can seeking get in the way of finding? When do you, you're seeking, do you ever find? When you find, I mean, we never stop learning and growing. But it's kind of hard to ask a question, but you know what I'm talking about this path of seeking.
Yes.
And I certainly got to a place myself of feeling like seeking. And I was just constantly like in sort of lack and overwhelm, all those things. And it's like, well, when do I get to say, okay, I'm kind of finding, and it doesn't mean I know everything or, I'm done, but it just means, I can start, establish a new base and seek from that place of action. I'm just kind of curious your experience with that. Because I know you've been deep into, spiritual practices.
No, I understand, Jamie. It's a good question, and it's a question that many people have. And I can only say that when I start seeking, when I went to Asia, I sat down on the Trans-Siberian Railway and I left home, and I knew I didn't have a return ticket. And I was like, oh, thank God, I'm out of here. Kind of, now I'm going to find out about life. but I had no concept of seeking. I had no concept of what I was looking for. I just know I wanted to come to terms with my own life. So, and as I got to know more and more about Buddhism, Hinduism, and religion, and this seeking, the more I realized I was actually looking for something. I was actually looking for a final answer that would satisfy me. You know, I was like, I can't live like this. I have to come to some kind of resolution. So that increased, my understanding of that increased to a point over several years where I realized okay, what do I do? What do I do? Buddhist meditation, mindfulness of breathing, doing this, doing that. So you're trying to lift yourself in the hair, and it's hard. You know, sitting on meditation retreats day after day after day after day. It's hard. It's tough going. But it's persevere. You persevere. That's your tapas. That's your spiritual fire you have to go through. You have to push yourself to go something. But once you start finding a little bit of openings, because if you push, it's going to open. There's no doubt about it. But once life starts revealing itself to you, I lost the thread. Then you have to be there, yeah. Because for me, and I think it can be differently. You know, it can be something. For me, it was very. I knew I was looking for a clear resolution, and I was pushing very hard. And I had the fortune to meet a very powerful teacher, who was actually grandson of Ramana in one way, because his teacher was a student of Ramana. So it's a nice lineage. So
Best one, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful, but I had the good fortune to meet him at the right time. And yes, this is what I was coming to. When you seek and you are looking to break, you're looking for something that's going to really, you know, you're kind of coming to a point of desperation. And I was coming to a point of desperation. This is what is it all about? And when they come to a point like that, you must realize, if you have a lot of attachment to the way you live, to your life, if you have family, if you have husband, wife, children, job that you don't want to give up, you're going to be in a crunch, because this point of transference might tell you, hey, you need to go this way. And if you're holding on to a lot of that stuff that is you, it's going to be difficult. Oh, I can do it at home. Yeah, sure, try that. It might work, but I'm saying for me and for many people, and you can read any spiritual literature, any religious literature, it is a tough path, because, and lucky are those that are not attached too much. And that's why it suits young people, because they haven't accumulated a lot of stuff yet. So they don't have much to give up, because they didn't get much. So that's a good thing. But I do believe in the promise that if you seek, don't worry, you can't continue seeking till you're going to be completely satisfied with the answers that you get. You don't need to settle for half measure at all. You don't need to. And you have the time on your hands. You know, you got time on your hands. You can do it all your life if you want to. But don't give up. That's what it's like, don't give up. Don't give up. There are final answers for yourself where you can go, finally, thank you very much. But that doesn't mean it's over. Then, like you say, then it's an ongoing learning experience. Even more so afterwards.
Well, and what if it comes back around to, well, no, this is actually, you talked about this a little earlier, this is how I am with my partner, my kids, my job, my work in the world, and so there's like, and can there be, can you have less attachment, more empathy and love, less ego in the world, which
Absolutely.
is where life happens. I mean, we're living
For sure,
life, yeah.
Jamie, I think a lot of people are much more mature on the path than I was. And if you're very mature on your path, you're responsible enough to be able to sort these things. You're very mature, and you probably already have a very mature life that your partner is very much like, yeah, I love what you're doing. Not like, oh, I hate what you're doing. Come back from that hippie trip. No. So if you're very mature already, because, for example, like my first wife, this Japanese lady that I was with, was a wonderful woman. She was a bit older than me, and she was so much more mature than me. So even though I had met my teacher a year before I met her, she later came along, and she was kind of blown up. Also, like, had these big revelations where she started flying. But she was in one way, when she opened her heart, she was in a better place than I was when I opened my heart. I opened my heart as a very immature young guy. And I have to kind of learn everything, I have to learn normal stuff. I have to learn the normal stuff. But if you're already normal and mature, the enlightenment might not be as, you might go, hey, no biggie. I've known that all along. No, who knows? People are different. Some people are very, very, very mature, and some people are very immature.
Anybody else?
Thank you. I don't want to monopolize, but thank you. We could talk all day. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else got any points or questions? Linda.
Hi there. Thank you. Wonderful discussion. I confess I'm not familiar with your books, and I just was fiddling with my phone, taking a quick look. Can you give us a little overview of what books you've written, what's available, and sort of what's for who? Like, where should we start reading, and which ones are about what? I'm just an overview of what you've done.
It's very amateurish. I'm sorry. It's very amateurish. It's really a collection of Facebook posts through the years, without only put chronologically. It's very amateurish. It's a mixture of.
It's sincere, not amateurish.
Yes, it is. It is a mixture of my thoughts about spirit, my thoughts about spiritual liberation, the implications of spiritual liberations, the responsibilities of spiritual understanding, in all various aspects in regards to life. There are a lot of musings about Aikido and the understanding of Aikido in relationship to spirit, but also in relationship to plain simple practice of Aikido, of etiquette, and to some extent the principles and dynamics of how to act and practice Aikido with another human being. And a lot has to do, I think everything bases itself on a deep understanding of truth, then, and how that then translates into relationship to the world, to you and me, and to everything that you encounter.
I just want to big Bjorn up a little bit here. I think many people who practice Aikido basically accept what their teacher told them, and that's the way it is. Bjorn is a thinker. He looks at everything and comes to his own conclusions as what's right for his path. And I'm sure if you do read his postings, if they're put together in a book, you will find some interesting revelations, because he's not just giving you what everybody else says. Paul.
I have them on a web platform called Issue. Issue is a free platform where you can compile books, where I also sometimes I print them out for myself. I print them out and I kind of try to sell them to my friends. Hard sell, but
do feel free to put it in the chat.
I will.
Okay. Paul, did you have
they're all available to read online for free, and also I have yes. That's a good thing to look at, because I have a lot of stuff there, several small books, and also other Aikido. Yeah, no, very good. I'm going to put that link on so you all can find that. And if you want to, you can also contact me and I will send you a personal copy.
Oh, I have a very quick comment. Bjorn, the etymological roots of amateur is someone who loves.
Oh,
So glad you're an amateur.
oh yes. Thank you. Thank you. That sounds great. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, has anybody else got anything they would like to ask or point out? Jamie, was that a bid or in passing? Okay, anybody else?
Quentin, there was somebody who put a comment in the chat, and I thought actually that it would be interesting to ask that one to Bjorn Sensei.
Okay, so this is Finn's comment, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me read it to you, Bjorn. So firstly, he says, thank you for a radiant, resident and relevant discussion. I'm suspicious of organized religion and dogmatism and sometimes sense this in Aikido, yet not at all in the present company. How to reconcile?
It's a very important question because I think too many people discard traditional religion or organized spirituality. I think that's a sad state of affairs because then you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. It's very important to recognize, and I also say says this also in one of his texts, that in order to understand life, somebody mentioned that we can seek ourselves, we can seek the truth without organized religion. That is true, but since we have organized religions, since the world religions has been around for thousands of years, and they hold immense value, and come on, they got so much to cover. We can't cover. There's so much depth there. But all I want to say is that once you taste the truth, to explore the origins of those faiths, of those religions, it's extremely rewarding. Look at the kernel, look at the source, look at Jesus, look at the Buddha. What are they about? That is they are door openings to different universes that you will not get by your own seeking. You will not. You might find the truth, but it will be so much richer by your own exploration into what human being has already explored. Remember, these are human beings. Jesus, the Buddha, these are human beings who walk the ground. They're followers, they're students, they're best students. They were people like us. They were people like us. It's written down in books. We have the text for people thousands of years ago. Incredible knowledge from direct experience. It's not all dogma. It's, somebody said it beautifully. A tradition is not the worship of ashes. It's the, I forgot. It's not the worship of ashes. It's the preservation of fire. So don't badmouth religion, please.
I sense that might be a brilliant way to finish the session, but Bjorn, one last chance to add anything that you want to give us.
Well, thank you guys for coming on and listening, and I'm really, really, really grateful for you to do so, because these kinds of conversations is something that I deem the most interesting, I value them beyond anything else. So thank you for coming and listening. And thank you for asking questions, because I think the dialogue, the back and forth, that's what Aikido is all about. So thank you.
And in our turn, on behalf of everybody else, thank you for giving us your time and thoughts and lighting a little path for those that needed a path lit. So thank you one and all once again. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you, Quentin.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye.
Amazing session. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Good day.
Yeah, bye.